Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Groove right here on Northwest Access TV. I'm your host, Nick Mumley, and alongside me tonight is Dustin Tanner. He is back, everybody.
I'm back after having to take last week off because actually I had an event last week, so I found out the event about Sunday. I found out about the event on Monday, so I texted you. I'm like, can't do the show, even though we made a whole big deal about me being back finally. So back this week. Next week we'll see. You never know. But for today, I'm back. How are you?
Week-to-week process. I'm very good today, actually, because we had a very exciting weekend of racing. Chase Elliott got another win, his third of the year, third in 11 weeks, actually. I mean, this guy, talk about, just coming out of nowhere.
Is he a contender for the championship now? Is that
I don't know. It's going to be interesting. We'll see how that goes. John Hunter Nemechek won his first ever Xfinity Series race. You see the results on your screen now. That was a big win for him. With a lot of pressure in that 42 car with, maybe Ross Chastain, going into that car next year. Who knows about that? But I think there's pressure on him. And before we get into that other stuff, we have motorsports business writer Adam Stern joining us at 7:25. So excited for that interview. But first, let's get right into that Xfinity race.
Yeah, so getting right into that Xfinity race. Boy, what a weird race. I knew you were at work on Saturday, right? So I texted
Correct.
you. Lap one, half the contenders in the playoffs are taken out. In one of the weirdest crashes ever, I'd put in the race. I'm looking, all right, Kansas, we're going to have ourselves a snoozer, a 1.5 miler, and they don't even get through the first turn, and I'm like, it's Xfinity racing, isn't it, at its finest? Names are made here, right? And then after all those good drivers were taken out, it was about 15 minutes until the field was separated, and there were 7 cars on the lead lap. I looked up, I'm like, only 7 cars on the lead lap now. Wow. Daniel Hemrick is going to dominate. I'm like, all right, Daniel Hemrick will probably win this race. It'll be fun to get his first ever win. And then John Hunter Nemechek wins. So it's just kind of okay. But he's been good all year.
Yeah, and Daniel Hemrick, though, this is the surprising one for me. I mean, if this kid was ever going to win an Xfinity race, you'd think this would have been the night.
It's going to be this one.
I mean, he has finished in the top 3 11 times this year in 30 races, but he's never won an Xfinity race. For whatever reason, he's like the Chase Elliott of the Xfinity Series, except he just hasn't been able to pull it off yet. He did fail post-race inspection as well, which was interesting to me.
He did. It's going to be interesting to see what comes of that, but I don't think, again, because everybody else wrecked out, your 4 big playoff favorites.
Right.
It was Bell, Allgaier, Custard, and I will always call him Custard. He did well. He was 25th running around. There was one other one that wrecked, too.
Austin Cindric, I believe it was.
Cindric, yes, it was Cindric. Oh, that was a bad crash from Cindric. He took the hardest hit of anybody. But so now, you have this whole playoff field that was kind of, I don't want to say set in stone, but it's Allgaier or Bell, they're going to be in the final four.
We had an idea of what we were going to see.
And now these guys are going to have to fight for dear life. I don't know if you have the points graphic to put up.
Let's run the points here for the Xfinity Series because it's crazy now out there. We've got Daniel Hemrick, the points leader. Maybe Elliott Sadler tomorrow if they do, in fact, announce a penalty for Hemrick. Usually penalties similar to what Hemrick has gotten have been, 10-point penalties.
It looks like it's going to be a 10-point penalty, I think. So Sadler, we had basically written off.
Yeah, we had written off Elliott Sadler.
Sadler's not going to win a championship. Now Sadler's going to be in the driver's seat here after Kansas to win this championship.
But look how it's going to be very tight, too, because you've got Bell, and then, after 5th, you've got your Justin Allgaiers, your Cole Custers. It's going to be really interesting to see. Cole Custer is 23 points behind the cutoff line. He has 2 races to make up 23 points. I think this could be, for Cole Custer, the deciding factor on whether or not he gets that ride at Stewart-Haas next year.
Well, it sounds like he's not getting that ride at Stewart-Haas. And we'll ask Adam about that later if there's been, the timeline. But, you look at that. It's Allgaier, who's had such a dominant season now, is in danger. Bell, who's had such a dominant season. Imagine if Bell comes out the next time they have a race and just puts up an egg and Matt Tift gets a win or something. Like, Bell could go. Bell and Allgaier, who've had two of the most dominant seasons we've seen in recent history, might not even make it to Miami. And this is
that would open up the door for a Hemrick or a Sadler, maybe even a Tyler Reddick, who's been wildly inconsistent throughout the year, but
got a good break at the right time.
Got a good break. He's in there now. I don't think that's going to last with, Xfinity Series doesn't go to Martinsville. They don't really have that big wild card race. It's Texas,
which is
annoying. Then it's Phoenix for them in this round, which, it doesn't leave these underdogs a lot of breathing room because Christopher Bell is going to come out. He's probably going to win one at either Texas or Phoenix.
Yeah, Texas is going to be a race where the power cars are the most dominant, and we saw it. RCR has to have everybody wreck out in front of them to be dominant on the 1.5 milers.
Right.
They have a good program, mind you. I'd expect Daniel Hemrick, but Hemrick's going to have a good shot at the championship now. I think Allgaier and Bell will come back up. It's going to be interesting to see who gets that third and fourth place spot, though. Because I think if I were to pick my four for Miami right now, based off what we saw, I'm going to pick Daniel Hemrick. I'm going to pick Justin Allgaier. I'm going to pick Christopher Bell. And then
that fourth one's just such a
that fourth one, you think Sadler would do it, but Reddick has been inconsistent. But Reddick has the speed. He's got the ability. We're going to have a wild card in that fourth spot.
Yeah, and that is if Cole Custer can't make that up either. 23 points, that's a big gap. But that he's got that Stewart-Haas power. They have been, driving really, really well recently. This has been a very consistent team, consistent driver. I think that we're looking at at Cole Custer, possibly making up this gap over these next two races. I wouldn't count him out.
And there's always the wild card. I got the full Xfinity points up in front of me in my screen. Austin Cindric, Penske brings a fast car. He can come out to Texas and Phoenix and pull off a win there. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. So, looking at this right now, between fourth and sixth, the cut line, it's 4 points that separate Bell and Allgaier. Allgaier doesn't have the playoff point advantage, though.
Right.
So, if it comes down to that, Bell's got that advantage. Bell's got that extra win, that one race where Bell, and this is where failing post-race inspection from Dover really bites Allgaier's team because they need that win right now. They could really use that win at Dover. Those points from Dover would have them still in the top four right now. But because they failed that post-race inspection.
Right. It's going to be interesting for sure. But, this is why the Xfinity Series has been so good this year.
It's been I don't want to say it's been better, but
it's
I close.
I'm gonna say it because I don't think that I don't think you want to. I'll take the heat from anybody who wants to yell at us for this. But yeah, I think the Xfinity Series.
It's been so good.
Like it's been equal, maybe better than the Cup Series.
I feel like I'm more invested in the Xfinity Series this year because the Cup storyline of the Big Three storyline really took away from the first half of the Cup season, and only lately as the Cup season got interesting. And, it kind of reverted back to not interesting this week at Kansas because we're going to move on to that. But, I'll say, yeah, Xfinity's been better this year. I'll say the quality's been better.
It's been close. I think they've both got their high points, their low points. I think that, for the Xfinity driver, I think there's a lot more drivers in Xfinity that can win a race any given Saturday than there are drivers that can win a Cup race on Sunday. But I love seeing the dominance from the Big Three up at the Cup level. I think that's a really cool fight because it's like in baseball. You had the Astros, the Yankees, the Red Sox this year, all fighting for it. They were three really good teams, beating everybody, but nobody really complained about them because it was fun to watch. I think that is, while it did get a little bit old after a while, I think you've got to respect that, and I was impressed by that.
Yeah, I agree with that general sentiment, too. I definitely do. But, all right, so you want to move on now, don't you?
Yeah, let's get to the Cup Series at Kansas, which was a really fun, it was a fun race because of the playoff point battle. Nobody really moved around all that much, but it added that sense of drama. Now, like you said, Kansas was a boring race through and through. Like I hate to call it boring, but I don't really think there's any other way to describe it.
I'm going to take the heat here and say that I took a nap during stage 3. I really did. And I've been good this year. I've been really good about not like trying to watch NASCAR races all the way through. But Sunday afternoon, the Texans had just won against the Jags, and I was watching. I'm just like, I'll keep the race on in the room, and I'll go sleep in the other room. I'll come back with like 20 laps to go. And when I woke up, Chase Elliott was doing a burn. I'm like, oh, hey, Chase Elliott won. And then I saw that Ryan Blaney had put it into the wall at some point.
Yeah, it was Blaney looked like he had a car that was gonna get that final spot and move on. But he got into the wall. The car, obviously something was not right with it after that, and it cost him. I mean, the same thing happened to him at Kansas in the spring. He was going for the win. Him and Kyle Larson made contact late in the race, and it took them both out. So looking back, that could have been a big win for them.
I don't.
Tough year for Blaney.
I don't like 1.5 milers being the deciding factor in a playoff race.
Yeah.
And this is my hill that I'm willing to die on here, is that you have, like, the Roval was fun because that was something new. Dega would have been fun as an elimination race because even if it was the freight train that we saw, it still would have been something different. I think the 1.5 mile races are perfect for in the middle, but I don't like them as a deciding race, especially when we have Homestead as the championship round too. And it's just, Kansas is just, I remember watching that spring Kansas race, and the entire time I'm like, do something. And then they finally wrecked in the last 10 laps. I'm like, oh, okay. But I don't want to be the fan that roots for wrecks. But at a place like Kansas, it's bland. It's bad.
I agree I agree with you to a point. But I think that, it's a great idea because we've got these mile and a half tracks that bring the big money. They're in the big markets. They're there. I mean, you're not going to be able to move them without losing tons of money. You might as well do something with them. And so they take these races. Kansas would have had absolutely zero storylines whatsoever if this wasn't a cutoff race. Nothing substantial to the playoffs happened in this at all. I think that, you bring in the drama of, okay, they need to do this or else they're out. I think that brings in a storyline. It gives people something to talk about. It gives, the cameras different drivers to focus in on. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, Brad Keselowski running 10th, Kyle Larson running 5th, cameras aren't going to be all over those cars looking at those guys. It just adds extra battles, I think.
And this is where my counterpoint comes in, because, yes, it adds the extra battles, but Kyle Larson can't really do anything. Because if his car is not fast enough to get up there, he's in a must-win situation. You felt bad for a guy like Alex Bowman all weekend because you just knew he didn't have a chance. And you just knew that he was a sitting duck. And the press gate didn't give him any coverage this week because he was a sitting duck.
Right.
And
well, I mean, he'd done that to himself, though, because he had the opportunity to win in this round.
But what I like about elimination races, where every car is, and this is where I get the heat because I think I'll like next year's package, I'll admit it. But I like elimination races. Like New Hampshire was a good example, right? New Hampshire, that race that we both saw in New Hampshire was really fun. It was really close towards the end. It wasn't everybody bunched up, but it was, everybody has a chance. I like that for my elimination races. Like in my middle, for my bread, I like two races where the beginning and the end of the round are races where it doesn't, it's about skill, driver skill. In the middle, I'll take your 1.5 miler where it's about being the mechanically best sound team. And that's what Kansas, and I'm also on the Kansas shouldn't have two races bandwagon. I really am.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
It's not a fun track to watch on TV. And I'm sure, attendance looked pretty decent. I'm sure they did well. It was fun. But, put a road course or something else on the schedule there.
My thing is, though, we've got all these, like I said, these mile and a half tracks are already built. NASCAR's not in a situation where they can be, spending money here and there and everywhere to put in new tracks to attract new people because, right now they're just trying to stay in the green right now, and they're not in the green right now anyway. So, they're not in a position for that. I think, every sport's going to have their boring games. You as a Houston Texan fan, you're not going to sit here and tell me every single one of their games you're on the edge of their seat.
Dude, Texans games are painful.
I'm sure that you're going to fall asleep during some of them.
Texans games are an exercise. No, because I have a lot of self-hate going on during Texans games where I'm like, why do I root for this stupid team? The seething alone keeps me up as my Avalanche just scored a power play goal, which is what I got going on over here because I never miss a game no matter where I am. But I guess the thing about Kansas that gets me is your point is correct. NASCAR doesn't have the money to just go and say, well, buy to these tracks. But I think Kansas would have been a lot more fun if it was like a one-day show, too, where it was, Xfinity unloads, Cup unloads. Heck, even a Cup Xfinity doubleheader. I would love to see something like that.
Yeah, that would be, and that would be fun, too. But, like, my point is, like, if the Patriots are playing the Dolphins and the Patriots are winning 24-0 after the first quarter, I'm probably going to shut that game off. But see, Kansas is the Patriots-Dolphin game.
But what
for
you
NASCAR.
have, if you can shut that game off, but you can tune into other games, and that's what NASCAR that's what NASCAR really struggles with, is because if NASCAR puts up a dud of a race on a Sunday afternoon, they can't get the viewers back because those viewers can watch football. This is why I hate going up against. I think NASCAR would be better for their playoffs to go on Saturdays and go up against college football, especially because NBC only has Notre Dame contract. So, NBC could give them better treatment on Saturdays for games, for races. So, I think a couple night races on a Saturday. And if you had to do a Sunday race, do it like you do where it leads into Sunday Night Football. So you try to siphon some of those viewers.
I thought that was really nice what they did with, leading it into Sunday Night Football, having the, events in the same city. They kind of intertwined the coverage a little bit, even though Al Michaels still might be the least knowledgeable person about NASCAR I've ever seen.
He might be, but, he tries. He tries. He really does try.
Those ad reads, they always kill me. But anyway, getting back to Ryan Blaney, I'm just, not, I don't get it. I thought that Blaney was going to be a championship contender this year. Instead, he's put up pretty much the same stats that he did last year and much less equipment.
So, reading your little paragraph on here, I think Blaney gets a pass this year because he did win a race. Yes, he won it by default, but, he did get to the round of 12 in the playoffs. He's had a decent year where, I think being in that 12 car, you move teams, you go to a whole different structure this year, and being, Wood Brothers, being in the Wood Brothers camp and then moving over to the Penske camp full time, I think there's a little change there. I think he's done okay. I think Blaney's going to be interesting because it's not like his dad was a Hall of Fame driver or anything. His dad was a pretty mediocre to average driver, but
never won a cup, right?
Blaney's already got 2 cup wins. He's already the best in his generation as far as his family goes. But I think the wins will start to come a little bit. I think Blaney's in a really good situation now.
He definitely is. Yeah.
I think, he's marketable. He's not going to be... I'm trying to think of a driver to compare him to. I'm trying to think of a good mid-level driver. He reminds me a lot of a younger Clint Boyer, where, he's going to be a fan favorite, is going to win some races, and is going to run consistent, but he's never going to be this guy who, he's never going to be Kyle Busch.
Yeah. I don't know. I was just thinking, we saw Blaney go out for the Wood Brothers last year and win that race at Pocono, make the round of 12 again. He made a team in Wood Brothers that was slowly dying. They were turning into a Richard Petty Motorsports.
Wood Brothers.
They weren't even running full time.
They did the smartest thing ever. That's something that the alliance that they pulled with Penske, saying, "Hey guys." I don't know how much that was Wood Brothers, as much as that was maybe Ford saying, hey, this is a historical team, keep them around. But the smartest thing that they've ever done, and now they get a guy in Paul Menard who's perfect for that team.
Right, and Menard's been running good races. He ran well at Kansas. I mean, but Blaney brought that team back from the dead. I think that, making that jump up to Penske this year with, all the sponsorship backing that he's got, he's got 2 teammates now. He's not a single car team anymore. They did have that technical alliance, but, he's got Logano and Keselowski in-house now. And I don't know. I just thought that Blaney was going to be a guy who could come in and compete for a championship this year.
I'm gonna give him the pass because I think he could have competed for the championship, but he's had some bad luck this year too. I think he's had Was it Bristol where he had a dominant car and got taken out this year?
Yeah,
Like
the spring Bristol race.
Spring Bristol, Blaney has been good this year. Hasn't been great, but I think, I think it's I also think Chase Elliott winning three races this year kind of makes you go, well, what about, I think it kind of puts a shadow on the fact that Blaney's run consistently, and that third Penske car has never been great. Historically, the third Penske car is always lacking somewhat behind.
Yeah.
But this year they figured it out. So, I'll give Blaney the pass there. I think he's doing fine.
Yeah, one other note before we move on from that. Blaney, while, his stats were very similar to last year's and his first year with the 12 team, he did lead like double the laps that he did last year with the Wood brothers. So I think that's an important factor as well.
I think, a couple of bad luck incidents aside, Blaney might have 4 wins this year. And, we've seen it with guys like Kevin Harvick. Sometimes the luck doesn't come to you till later on in your career. And Blaney will get there.
Yeah. So on top of Blaney, we talked about Alex Bowman as well, but Kyle Larson, Brad Keselowski also eliminated. I was kind of surprised. Larson had the consistency this year, just didn't have the win. Keselowski was all over the place the first part of the year, then won 3 races in a row and looked like a guy who could go win a championship.
I never believed it with Keselowski. I sound weird there. Did I just sound weird? Maybe I caught myself on the echo. I never believed it with Keselowski. I think he got 3 lucky-ish wins in a row where people made mistakes and he was there. Yeah. And look, a win's a win, but he was never the fastest car in those 3 wins.
Very true. But yeah, Keselowski, I just think that, Keselowski and Larson, you look at these guys, I think that they play into exactly what NASCAR is looking for and wants from these playoffs. Larson, consistent so much this year, but with the new, I don't know what happened, but he took a giant step back this year. He just never got that win. I think it was because of Chevy, but
I think it was because of Chevy, but I don't know how I feel about Chip Ganassi Racing right now. Their Xfinity program is one of the best. Right. Their Cup program was lacking this year, I would say. It was definitely lacking on a couple of fronts, and it felt like Larson was, and I can't tell if it's because Jamie McMurray is just having a down year, but Larson felt like he was overdriving a car. When Larson was in the top 10, it felt like he was overdriving a 10 to 20th place car, right? That's the feeling I've gotten from Chip Ganassi Racing this year.
Right, so. And it's weird because, you look back at where Larson started with this team, and that's what they were. I mean, the 42 car never won since, Jamie McMurray was in it back in the...
Full circle, right? Well, Juan Pablo Montoya had a couple of wins. He had 1 or 2 road course wins.
Yeah, and then that second place finish at Dover, too. But, I mean, Larson came in as a rookie and kind of just took this team and overperformed with them and turned them into a team with high expectations, which really surprised me this year because, I think Larson's still in this stage where he's growing as a driver every year, but this year it just felt like he took a step back. And man, still get Larson to Homestead one of these days. He's gonna win. He's gonna win a championship or two.
He will
in this current format.
And I definitely have faith that Larson will be able to climb the hill and pull it off. It's just whether he pulls it off in that 42 or not remains to be seen. I think.
Yeah, I've always thought, for me, I've always just put the perfect match in my head of Kyle Larson replacing Jimmy Johnson at Hendrick.
Yeah, I think that really is a realistic scenario. I've always put the match in my head of Kyle Larson goes to Storehouse Racing. But Kyle Larson has also said that he's really loyal when it comes to the fact that, the only owner who said to him, you don't have to bring me a paycheck was Chip Ganassi. Right. So, I think part of Larson wants to be that guy who does build that program up. It'll be interesting to be seen, though.
Yeah. Chase Elliott, obviously, winning again. Second time 3 weeks. Third time in 11 races. This team looks like they've got it figured out. And you've got Martinsville next week, Phoenix in 2 weeks. Those are 2 races that that team almost won last year. Is Chase Elliott? I know last time he won, we kind of blew it off, saying, there's no way he can compete for a championship. Can he now?
I think Chase Elliott might get to the Final Four. I feel confident about slotting him into that 4th spot. But do I think he's going to win the championship? I don't think so. but they've had more speed. Of all the Chevy teams, they have been the one that has seemed to figure it out. So we'll see. I think Martinsville is a really strong track for him. Joey Logano, type of dark horse for Martinsville.
Right.
But I think, we can get back to that in a bit. I think we have something.
We have. We're going to go out to the phone lines now. Our guest today is a motorsports writer at sportsbusinessjournal.com. He's been, all over the breaking news. First guy to report numerous driver changes, sponsorship announcements. It's Adam Stern. Adam, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
So, let's start off with you before we get into, the whole NASCAR scene. I want to know, how'd you get your start in writing, and have you always had a passion for motorsports, or do you just write about it now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say kind of in the late high school years, I started kind of transitioning to figuring out that, writing was something I might be able to look into doing, and kind of just got into it from there. At my high school, went to college at Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU in Richmond, Virginia, and studied journalism at the school, and also worked for our student paper. Got a lot of great experience there. Was able to cover VCU's 2011 Final Four run, which was one of the more incredible, certainly experiences in my life, and then honestly in college basketball quite a number of years with the run they had to the Final Four. So that was kind of an invigorating experience and whatnot. And graduated in 2012, and just ended up at SBJ SBD. Kind of started off with our online team, doing a little bit more kind of editing and helping curate our online coverage as opposed to 100% original work. And in late 2014, our motorsports writer left to go to a new gig at the Wall Street Journal, and just kind of got called out of the bullpen. But that being said, certainly love racing. Loved racing heading into it, and certainly watch more of it and enjoy it more than ever now, with how much I'm kind of knee deep into it all. But certainly, I think everyone kind of has a need for speed, and I've always been one of those people as well. So, I've always enjoyed racing, but, again, there's no doubt I'm watching more of it and paying attention to it more than ever these days. And, there's a lot going on the business side, a lot going on in competition as well. And so it's enjoyable for sure. But, yeah, just kind of the way the cookie crumbled, but at the same time, I feel very lucky about that.
So, Adam, you mentioned the VCU thing. Our second question we had for you was, do you have a career high that stands out to you? And is there an event that you haven't covered that you would like to someday?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, certainly I think, the 2011 Final Four run was absolutely incredible. I mean, that year, if you remember back, and it's tough to remember back at this point, but VCU was kind of on the bubble, and after they got selected into it was the first year of the first four, where they do those kind of 68 teams.
Yeah, I remember that.
And even with those first, even with us being in the first four, Dick Vitale was all over ESPN saying it was a sham we got in, and it wasn't right. And then for us to come out and win 5 games, 4 of them versus Blue Bloods, it was just absolutely incredible for sure. In racing, it's been great as well to get to go to some of these, meccas of motorsports like Daytona, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Some of these tracks, obviously there's a lot of historic tracks as well that I've been able to go to that, maybe not quite as big as them, but, some great meccas of NASCAR, like, your Martinsvilles and your, all those sort of tracks. So,
right.
I think obviously the experiences in motorsports have been great as well. And, the places, we get to travel to as part of the motorsports media is great. Obviously it's exciting to be covering a lot of big moves at times. There's just so much going on right now. So honestly, if I had to pick one career highlight, so to speak, I think it would probably still be that 2011 Final Four run for VCU, but have been lucky enough to have a lot of great experiences in motorsports too.
See, up here in Vermont, we have our big basketball team is the University of Vermont Catamounts. And
right, yeah, the Catamounts.
Watching VCU do that back in 2011, also us being, in that same spot VCU was back then before they became a major powerhouse. It's always been the dream of Catamount fans up here to turn into VCU because of that 2011 run they had. So I think that's kind of funny that you were a part of that. But that's awesome.
Yeah, honestly, the team has, just through the way the cookie has crumbled. We lost the coach who helped get us there, and now we're in the A10, which is a little bit of a tougher division. So honestly, the team over the past 10, 11 years is probably at one of its lower points right now, unfortunately. But we'll see what they can pull together this year, and if they can get back up there. In any event, again, yeah, no question, it was incredible, and I definitely think mid-majors can do it. Given the right circumstances, given the right ingredients. I saw it before my eyes, and obviously we've seen it with so many other teams as well over the years. From Butler's obviously built themselves into an established powerhouse and whatnot. I just saw today the top 25 preseason AP poll, and I think Gonzaga's number 2 or 3. Obviously they're always a powerhouse, but they're still technically a mid-major. So yeah, it's doable given the right ingredients for sure, and it's always great to see from my perspective when that happens.
Now moving on to NASCAR, do we we've seen how good the Stewart-Haas cars have been this year, and one of them might be open. Do you think that we have a timeline for news coming up on the 41 car at Stewart-Haas?
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly, if you were to somehow be a fly on the wall between a conversation between, the SHR team president and Gene Haas, I'm sure they have a timeline. I can't say I've exactly learned what it is. I don't think there's any gigantic rush right now. Certainly from, fans' perspective, media perspective, there's that natural curiosity to get things confirmed and finalized. But at the end of the day, I think, they have some time still. We were not even in the off season yet. And I think if we're, thinking back to Kurt Busch's situation last year, I'm pretty sure they announced that a week or two into the off season. So that kind of gives us right. So it kind of gives us a decent gauge on, they probably don't want to go too deep in the off season, but I don't think, they're currently panicking. Certainly our understanding continues to be that they've been talking with Daniel Suarez, and, I think there's a pretty good chance he ends up there in that 41 car. It's certainly a little interesting how, Kurt Busch was in deep talks with Ganassi and they haven't announced it yet, but I don't think necessarily from my understanding that deal is done or not happening. I think they're just lining up sponsorship situations, and those things take time. For example, Monster Energy, they're notorious for being very tough negotiators and doing things on their own time. And so I think, you look at possibly Monster Energy going to the number 1 car, and that can help explain why we've seen the delay there. So, I certainly still think at this point, my understanding is that, he's likely to go to that number 1 car. And, with that being open now with the 41 car, I think, Daniel Suarez is the most likely option. They've definitely been talking to him. I know that for a fact. And, between Gene Haas and Carlos Slim-Domit, who's kind of the backer and somewhat of an agent of Daniel Suarez, those are 2 billionaires. And, as one other agent in the sport said to me, billionaires make stuff happen. They use the expletive instead of saying stuff, but, billionaires make stuff happen. And so you put those 2 guys, Gene Haas and Carlos Slim-Domit, with each other, and, if they have so much business, they have so much, different business ties between the 2 of them that, I think there's a good chance they'll be able to work out a deal. So if I had to kind of give my prognostication, I certainly still expect that there's a good chance that Suarez is in the 41, but at the same time, I haven't heard that's a done deal, so we'll have to wait and see. So that's a long-winded answer. I wouldn't be surprised if they announce in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but could it be more like 4 or 5 weeks? Yeah, it could.
That's wonderful insight there. It's always interesting thinking about, Gene Haas and how he does brand-to-brand deals, too, of some companies. But moving on to our next question, you wrote a piece last week talking about how NASCAR could venture to Australia for a showcase race. What's that probability there? Because you got a lot of NASCAR fans excited about that. Is that something that you think is going to actually come to fruition?
Yeah, it's interesting. First and foremost, I really can't even take credit for it. What happened was the long story short, one of the teams over there that's aligned with Team Penske was having their drivers test a NASCAR car during an event last week, and as part of that, Motorsport.com wrote an article just noting that, and they kind of wrote that as their lead. And I happened to be checking it out, and I noted kind of buried in the story that said the growing relationship between supercars and NASCAR has led to speculation that NASCAR could hold a race there. And certainly on my end, we've been paying attention to how first and foremost, NASCAR's been, extremely ramping up their international ambitions and efforts this year. Secondarily, we saw, John Probst and Steve O'Donnell, NASCAR's two top competition executives, go over to Australia last month. I've heard about how Team Penske has been pushing NASCAR leadership to pay more attention to supercars because they think they have a good team structure. So, hearing that speculation from motorsport.com certainly rang potentially true to me. And so I just happened to tweet it out and just kind of tweet out that line as kind of the lead and, kind of took off from there. But where it really got fascinating is later that night, or essentially the next day in Australia, some of the media asked the CEO of Supercars about it, and he basically confirmed it. Said, yes, it's early days, but we are talking to NASCAR about a range of different things, and that includes possibly, having them hold a race here next year at this event. It was the Gold Coast, I think, 600 or something like that. So it's an event that I believe would be held next year on the Martinsville weekend. And so it sounds like it's definitely in the works. I think it's too early on my end to speculate as to how possible it is. I just don't know, so I'm not going to say for sure either way. I mean, if I knew it was very likely, I'd say that, but I don't, so I can't say that it's very likely. But certainly the fact that you have the CEO of Supercars coming out and confirming that it's possible would seem to suggest that, there's at least a decent chance of it. What does decent mean? I mean, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. Tough to say, I think, right now. But, if it was 1% or less or 5% or less, not so sure that the CEO of Supercars would come out and confirm that to the media. So I think the fact that he came out and said, yes, we're looking at this, it's possible, we want to make it happen. You combine that with all the other nuggets of information, NASCAR has this growing international ambition. And certainly it's kind of out of nowhere, but it does seem possible. So I think we'll just have to see how it plays out. I'll certainly be working on my end to try and get NASCAR's reaction, see if they can provide any further insight on their end. But as of right now, I think the best way to put it is it certainly seems possible, and we'll just have to see, how it plays out over the coming couple of weeks, a month. But if it was impossible or even close to impossible, I don't think you would have seen the CEO come out and say that. That being said, we'll have to see, is it the Xfinity Series? Is it even just a group of retired drivers potentially? So we're not sure exactly if it's going to be Cup, Xfinity, trucks, group of retired drivers or whatnot. But certainly the fact that the CEO came out and said that seems like something's in the works for sure.
Now, moving on to, F1 and maybe even NASCAR coming out here, we've been hearing, all summer long about the possibility of Fernando Alonso coming out, running the Daytona 500, IndyCar races, stuff like that. Where does that stand right now?
Yeah, honestly, that information is not easy to come by as far as verifying. They keep it pretty tight and pretty close. There's no question, it was publicly, and it's kind of interesting. I was just reading an article myself, and I don't blame any particular person for this, but, Fernando Alonso said IndyCar was never an option, and then literally in the same article, he actually says it was an option. So, I certainly think they were looking at it. Zach Brown, the CEO of McLaren, confirmed that, there's no question they were looking at it. We know that for a fact because the way we originally broke that story way back in, I believe, in April or May, was because they had people on the ground trying to land sponsorship, and those rumors kind of quickly got around to other people in the garage. And so, there's no question that McLaren was absolutely looking at coming full time. I certainly think at one point or another, Alonso was an option, but it seems like around August, according to the information that I'm seeing, which was, really that deadline for Michael Andretti to figure out whether Zach Brown could make this happen. Seems like around August, those plans kind of got derailed. So I think at this point, I'd be surprised if Alonso doesn't run the Indy 500. Could we possibly see him run a second or third IndyCar race? I think that's possible, possibly at COTA, maybe one other race or two besides that. And then we'll just have to see what happens from there. Obviously he's being courted by Formula E. We have heard that he's considering running the Daytona 500, but, it's also possible he just does a car swap with Jimmy Johnson, and that's it as far as NASCAR. So it's tough to say, I'm hearing it all, sometimes there's conflicting information out there, and that's one of these cases where it is right now. There are people who are, should be familiar with the situation, and they're saying, yes, he's considering running the Daytona 500. And then there's other people who should be familiar with the situation. They're saying they're not hearing it. or they're hearing it's a car swap. So, and obviously we saw that tweet today that kind of hinted more at a car swap. So, I think it's too early to say for sure. Again, we know he's being courted by Formula E. So, I think next year's shaping up. And honestly, if we had done this interview a week ago, I probably would have said the same thing. It's kind of gotten confirmed since then, which is that, over the past couple of weeks, and certainly since last week, it started to look like next year's turning into more of like a sort of all-star type year for Fernando, where he's just going to do a ton of one-offs. And by a ton, I mean, 4 to 5 WEC races and then maybe 2 or 3 other mega races. And, maybe looking at 7 or 8 races next year, but a couple, really big ones. So it seems like he's kind of, doing a bit of an adventurous year, almost like he's taking a sabbatical. And so, honestly, on my end, I cannot confirm yet that he's doing Daytona or that it's just a car swap or that maybe it's both. Again, there's just conflicting information out there right now. So we're all on the edge of our seats, media, just like fans, waiting to see kind of what gets confirmed. And unfortunately, when there's conflicting information out there, it's tough to say what's going to happen for sure. So,
right.
They've definitely done a good job of kind of milking the media coverage out of this and getting lots of attention, and, both McLaren and Alonso. And so, I think that's probably going to continue for the next couple of weeks until he finally confirms his plan. So, yeah, it's just too early for me to say what his for sure plans are. As soon as I can confirm it, if that happens to be before they announce it, I'll do that.
Yeah, so before Nick gets you out of here with our last question, I just want to say that it's really interesting to see how you follow the money in some cases and can figure out some of this major news in our sport before anybody else. And you figure it out, like the Matt DiBenedetto to Toyota thing, that was in the works for 6 to 8 months, and figuring it out when, he left and didn't have a job. I just really want to compliment you on the way you do your reporting, because it's always interesting to see. And, your Twitter account is one of the first ones I check in the morning. I check it a couple times a day. I'm like, I wonder if something's come out today. And just the news you break and how you break it is it's interesting stuff. So, Nick, you got one more question for him, right?
Yeah, well, we'll end it here on a fun one for you, Adam. The championship coming to a close here in the next couple of weeks. You got a lot of different contenders for it. If you had to pick a guy, who would it be?
That's a great question. Certainly appreciate the kind words. Look, Chase Elliott's been on a real roll. So, it'd be so much fun to pick him, and just see if that turns out being right. I mean, obviously, I think the safe choice is probably Kyle Busch or Harvick. Seems like Truex has kind of lost a little bit of his mojo right now for one reason or the other. So, honestly, I think my head, just where, the smart answer would probably say Harvick. But just for fun, I'll say Chase Elliott. So let's say Chase Elliott. He's on a roll right now. We'll see if it happens. I mean, anything's possible. There's no question that he's looking good now, with a couple races heading into the final 8. And so, yeah, I'm going to go with Chase Elliott. I wouldn't be surprised if Logano somehow makes it happen as well. Just to be clear, I mean, he's kind of one of those guys who's just, he's been close in recent years. Last year, obviously, he missed the playoffs after having his win stripped away at Richmond. So he's one of those guys who's been sneaky, I think, in this top 8. He was leading a lot of laps on Sunday. So, honestly, I think it might be a little bit of a mistake on my end to have just totally ruled out Joey Logano. But that being said, Chase Elliott, sticking with it. Let's see if the 9 can dig it up and make it happen.
There you go.
All right, Adam. Thanks for joining us. It's Adam Stern, the motorsports writer at sportsbusinessjournal.com.
Hey, thanks so much, guys.
See you later. So, as we transition into the last, 15 minutes of the show, after that was a really fun interview, too.
Yeah, Adam is one of the greatest, when it comes to this type of stuff. Adam is just, he's practically a pro at this stuff.
Right.
And he, there are a lot of ways you can report things in NASCAR, and he does the best job at following the money and figuring out where, hey, this company has a brand-to-brand deal with this company, and this company sponsors this guy, and this guy is moving. And, the way he was talking about the Carlos Slim stuff and the Gene Haas stuff, saying, got me thinking, brand-to-brand stuff probably going to be going on here, right?
Right. Yeah, always fun to kind of see the sport from a different lens, for sure. But, getting back to NASCAR's roots is what we're doing on Sunday as we go to Martinsville for at the oldest track that NASCAR puts on the schedule. And this race is always just so much fun, Dustin.
500 laps of pure chaos, because no matter what you do, you cannot get out of the way. And I think tracks where you cannot get out of the way are the best tracks, because you got to move people out of the way. There are 2 lanes of passing, and cars are going to get beaten up. And even if it's a boring race, somebody's always passing somebody. And this is a race where anybody can really win it. You don't have to have the best car.
Right, yeah. This is the Talladega of the round of 8, but it's kind of weird to call it the Talladega because it is the wild card race, but you go from the biggest track to not the smallest. I think the second smallest Martinsville is. I think Bristol's smaller.
I think Bristol's just barely
Just
smaller.
barely. But anyway, super speedway to short track, wild card the same way. You have to be so good. You just have to be a good driver to race at Martinsville, and you've got to bring that, kind of aggressiveness with you. So I think that's what's going to make it big. But looking back the last couple of years with this race, you look at it, you've got Chase Elliott getting taken out by Denny Hamlin last year, and then all the chaos that ensued from that one.
And then 2 or 3 years ago?
It was 2 years ago with Kenseth and Logano.
Kenseth taking out Logano, and that's why we have the rule we have now when it comes to
damaged vehicle policy.
Yes, the Matt Kenseth rule.
And don't forget, Jeff Gordon won his last race in that one as well. So I'm very excited for Martinsville. It's going to be a fun race. This is what makes NASCAR. This is the kind of racing that NASCAR wants to have. This is what the fans are going to want. So I'm excited for it. And as we look at let's bring up the battle for 8th graphic here. As we go into Martinsville, you look at it. Look how tight that is. The only 4th place is that last cutoff spot. 5th through 8th will be eliminated after Phoenix 3 weeks from now. Martinsville, we saw last year, you can either get off to a great start or you can have your hopes completely ended.
Well, when you look at that graphic right there, and let's look at it. So Chase Elliott, great at Martinsville. Clint Boyer, great at Martinsville. Joey Logano, underrated at Martinsville. Kurt Busch, great at Martinsville. You have 4 drivers right there where Martinsville is on the list of strengths for these guys. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And then, Eric Almirola, who has run really good this year. But, he could be in a place where, if chaos reigns, he could gain a bunch of points and then go back to tracks that he's fast at. So that's going to be a really interesting battle, because I think one of the playoff guys is going to win. Kyle Busch is always good, too, at Martinsville, too.
Won last year, yeah.
Kyle Busch could come out here and just put up a stinker, right? Yeah. And just pitch a shutout. Denny Hamlin is good at Martinsville, too, so he might be able to come and steal a win. We haven't had that yet. We haven't had a non-playoff driver win a race yet. So,
yeah, the guy I'm definitely going to be watching on Sunday is Joey Logano, though. Adam touched on it a little bit in our interview with him, but you look at Joey Logano's last 2 seasons. At this point last year, going into this race, Joey Logano, it was his championship to lose. He was the best driver in the sport. I don't think anybody was really going to come close to him. And, he gets taken out. And then, he gets taken out by Kenseth with that whole thing. It was unfortunate to watch. Because, Logano kind of took a step backwards after that. And a year after that, he was kind of there, made the championship 4, but didn't end up, winning the championship.
So Joey Logano's last 4 finishes at Martinsville, and you can tell me which one is the outlier. 6th, 24th, 4th, 9th. 3 top 10s in his last 4 Martinsville races. When he wasn't taken out by anybody.
And I think that, he's kind of got this chip on his shoulder now because, we saw like 2-3 years ago that losing the championship. He was involved with the deal with Carl Edwards in 2017. Last year, he had the win taken away. He didn't even make the playoffs. I mean, I think that this is Joey Logano's revenge tour. He's just not telling anybody about it because he's been so quietly
good. I think that's what's really worked for them well this year, is that he's consistently been one of the best drivers. He hasn't put it in victory lane as many other guys, but you don't
need to.
You don't have
this
to
part
put
of the
it
year.
in the victory lane until this part of the year. And this is a team that, if I'm putting money on teams, I have faith in Joey Logano going in the Martinsville, because Now that he's only the Penske car left, too, he'll have those extra resources at his disposal because now Penske's got to be like, okay, we're getting Joey Logano into the championship, right? They're going all in on this guy now. Right. So I think he'll pull it off. I don't know if he'll win on Sunday, but he's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, and then another guy I'm going to be watching is, well, two guys. The Stewart Haas cars, Clint Bowyer and Kevin Harvick. I think that, you got two guys right here. Bowyer won this race in the spring. He's kind of been looking for a win the last couple of weeks. All of his Stewart Haas teammates have won since his last win back in Michigan. I think that Clint Bowyer is kind of due. He didn't run as well as he wanted to last week at Kansas, which was his home track. And that's important for him. I think that Clint Bowyer could be sneaky good in this one and, come out and, make his way to the championship 4. I think that we could be looking at Bowyer realistically making it because of this race, because of how good he is.
And if Bowyer makes it, he's got the speed and the reckless intent to pull something off, right? I look at Bowyer. I also look at Kurt Busch. I think Kurt Busch,
in his last possibly couple of races with Stewart Haas.
I think it would be really perfect for Kurt Busch, when Stewart Haas brought him there to win a championship, and Gene Haas has been pretty, publicly disappointed with the dude. I think it would be a real wonderful, and it would cap off Kurt Busch's career in the way of, this is who Kurt Busch is, double birds, I'm out the door, let me win a championship on my way out, and then have you deal with the fallout of, now you have another guy coming into that car that's never won a championship at this level, and you're letting a 2-time champion go because he underperformed. It would be the perfect. I kind of want to see him win just out of spite. I'm always a fan of spite championships. I think Kurt Busch, especially if he beat Kevin Harvick, would be a wonderful spite championship.
It would be, yeah, especially after what went down in Chicagoland, I believe it was, at the end of the stage where they were fighting with each other for that last spot. I think it would be funny if Kurt Busch, had the opportunity to win the championship, but had to move Kevin Harvick out of the way to do it. Making up scenarios right now on the Inside Groove, but that's okay. Yeah,
that's why we're here.
There's just so many different storylines. I realistically think that there is 7 guys in the 8 remaining drivers that can make it to the.
Who's the one guy you don't have making it?
I don't see Eric Almirola. I don't see a situation where Eric.
I see Eric. I think he can. I think they got good speed. I think they could win a race at Texas. I really do think that 10 team has been at times the second best team in that Stewart Haas camp. Don't sleep on Eric.
At this point, though, Eric Almirola, he's got the win. He's got the top 10, sometimes top 5 speed, but I don't think this is the kind of year where top 10 speed doesn't cut it for you. You have to finish top 5 in all 3 of these races. You probably have to, finish second or win one to make it in on points, because more than likely 2 or 3 of the spots are going to be taken up by winners. And what if Harvick, Truex, or Busch doesn't win one of the races? What if they're not one of those guys that goes out and wins? I think you got Eric Almirola already down 12 points. He's got the win at Talladega, but he hasn't shown the consistent top 5 speed that all those other guys have shown that they can have. Almirola got the win at Talladega, but I don't see him winning a race at a 1.5 mile track at this time of year.
I could see him pull it off.
It'll be interesting for sure. Kevin Harvick, the other guy I want to talk about going into Martinsville. This guy, talk about a snake bitten. People haven't really been talking about this a whole lot. I think probably because they're relieved Kevin Harvick doesn't have 25 wins right now, because he easily could.
Kevin Harvick's whole career has been this, though. That's why nobody's talking about it. It's always been a career where, Kevin Harvick has a really good car, and his pit crew missed a look. Kevin Harvick has the real fastest car, and speeding violation. And Kevin Harvick has the fast car, and yellow flag with 5 to go. This has been Kevin Harvick's entire career, man. I don't think you remember most of it because you are pretty young, but man, since 2001, he should have won a championship 2 at RCR, but he didn't. So,
I think I think this is going to be Harvick's round that he dominates. He won Texas last year. He's so good at Phoenix. Every time they go there, I think there's a good opportunity. Harvick can go 2 for 2 or 2 for 3, maybe even go 3 for 3 in this round.
3 for 3.
He really could, because you look back, literally all of the last like 5 races, he has dominated the first part of the race. And then at Dover, obviously, pit road problems. Kansas, pit road problems. Talladega, he ran out of gas. I mean,
the key is don't pit. Right. That's the key. That's all you got to need is just don't. If you're Kevin Harvick, don't pit. Just don't go to pit road. That's it.
Right.
You championship.
Yeah, but man, I think Harvick is, he's out for a little bit of revenge too, just like Joey Logano. And I think Harvick's going to be sneaky good. I think this is going to be the stretch, I think, where Kevin Harvick kind of cements the fact that he's going to be the champion this year.
Either Kyle Busch or Kevin Harvick are going to come out and win this championship in the next 3 races. And it's going to be interesting because the only other guy who I could see going 3 for 3 on this stretch would be Kyle Busch, because Kyle Busch has done this before. And I think Kyle Busch, I think there's some motivation there to actually get a championship where he's raced the entire season, right? It'll be very interesting to me to see how this Martinsville race goes. I will predict right now that somebody will be moved and we might have a fist fight. We'll have words. We'll have talking words at the end of this race.
You wrecked me. Remember those words, the wise words of Chase Elliott this time last year. Before we get on to the F1 side of things, I do want to make our picks before the round starts for the Championship 4.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'll go first then. I'm going to go with Harvick, Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, Joey Logano.
I'm going to go with Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch, Kurt Busch, and then I think MTJ will... No, MTJ, Joey Logano.
Isn't it crazy how far that 78 team has fallen?
I think the minute we heard that they were shutting down, they've kind of thrown in the towel a little bit.
Right. Even though Truex, insists that they've kept going, but man,
it's hard. It's really hard.
It's difficult for them because they don't know if they have jobs next year.
Well, they most of them have been offered jobs in Barney's company if they want to stay in Denver, and a good chunk of them, they get to decide, do they want to go back down to Carolina to do NASCAR, or do they want to stay in Denver? I think a good amount of them are going to stay in Denver and not be in NASCAR next year.
Right. Yeah. So, last couple of minutes of the show here. Formula One. We don't usually talk about Formula One, but this was a really good race yesterday. The U.S. Grand Prix at the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. The only race in the United States. They do race not far from here in Canada. Over the summertime. I want to go to that race. That's on my bucket list to hit.
We'll do Inside Groove from Montreal next year.
Inside Groove Live, French edition. But anyway, you look at the results from that race. Kimi Räikkönen winning for the first time in over 100 races. It's the longest gap ever between wins in F1 history. And as the season comes down to the close here, Räikkönen obviously has announced that he's not going back to Ferrari next year. So this kind of is, saying goodbye party to Ferrari here. And Lewis Hamilton, he all he needed to do was finish ahead of Max Verstappen to lock up the championship, but he didn't do it. And so Sebastian Vettel, who finished 4th, stays alive. They will go off to Mexico, and Lewis Hamilton will look to lock up yet another championship.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool to see Kimi win this race because, this will be his last chance to win. He's going to a mid-tier.
He's 39 years old. Yeah.
He's 39 years old. He's going to a mid-tier team next year to just kind of ride around and have some fun. So it's really cool to see him pull this one off because, he wants to go out with a bang.
Right, yeah. So it's gonna be exciting to watch as that comes down. Lewis Hamilton, he has, I read on Twitter earlier this week. Now, don't believe everything you hear on the internet, folks, but I did see from a couple of guys, including Adam Stern, that Lewis Hamilton might be considering a run at the Daytona 500.
That'd be really cool to see.
Which would be awesome to see. Anyway, that's all we have for you tonight on the Inside Groove. I'm Nick Mumley. He's Dustin Tanner. Hopefully he'll be here next week.
We don't know. We'll find out.
Nothing confirmed just yet.
Nothing confirmed.
Thanks for tuning in on Channel 15, Facebook Live, however you may be watching us tonight. We'll be back next week. Might be just me, but might be us both. You'll have to tune in and find out. Next Monday, 7 o'clock, right here on Northwest Access TV. Thanks for coming by, folks.